Welcome to this edition of Morgan You Asked For podcast. Wednesday night, the 4th of February. Kind of and we'll get to it towards the end, but a pregame / lead-in show to the Iowa basketball game tonight that just starts at 10 o'clock Iowa time, which is very weird for basketball fans around here to be starting a game on Wednesday night at 10 o'clock, but it is 8 o'clock out in Seattle. So late night game out there gets us a really late night here in the Midwest. And if you're on the East Coast, which I know Chris Hassel's a fan, it won't start till 11 o'clock. So well after midnight when that one will be over. We'll talk about the Hawks here in a little bit. We want to welcome Trevor Voss into this. I'm Ryan Morgan. For those of you who might be new to us, and I did see this last week where we had more people from New York. We had someone from Liberia. I'll be honest, I'm pretty good with geography in the world. I don't know where Liberia is in the world, which is kind of weird and random, but it is what it is. We do thank everybody for tuning in, for paying attention to the podcast or YouTube or Facebook, wherever you might get this. We do appreciate it and ask that you spread the news and if someone you think might like this, just tell them about it and tell them to tune in and they might like it. Hopefully my voice gets better. I've talked a lot here the last few days in PE class. We're starting the Olympics, Trev, and the Olympics are coming up. We're not going to talk a lot about them this time. We might next week, but doing Olympic stuff in PE class. Olympics coming up on Friday. And Super Bowl this weekend. So lots of sports coming. But, Trev, welcome. And let's start with the Super Bowl. We'll kind of get your take right away.
Well, we talked about it a little bit before we got started here. This is kind of a really unexpected Super Bowl. Before going into the season, hardly anybody had either of these teams making it, let alone both. So I think that's why it doesn't have quite as much build-up or anticipation this year as we've seen some in the past. So I think that is part of it. I think they said if you combine both these teams' preseason odds, it was the biggest long shot Super Bowl matchup since they started keeping track of those types of odds, however many years it's been. So we also talked about, too, that there's not a lot of personalities. Sam Darnold, still people have question marks about him to an extent. He's not a big personality guy. Obviously, you don't see him doing a bunch of commercials and all that. And Drake May's still a young guy. So I think that has part to do with it. Honestly, the biggest celebrity in this game, as far as the real popular players, is probably going to be Stephon Diggs for good and bad reasons.
Yes, and that is a big thing. And we talked about before the show, and I've read over the week or so leading up to this game, week and a half now, that in the last 10 years, it's been Brady or Mahomes, and then one time it was Stafford. So a Hall of Fame quarterback or the best of all time, big names, big markets, the Rams, with the win and McVay, the young guy, but Grandpa was a great coach in the league. Just the storylines were there. These are, McDonald's a young coach coming off the Harbaugh tree. And then you got a quarterback that's, was the number 1 pick in the draft. People forget that he was drafted before Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, correct?
Correct.
So, it wasn't like they didn't think he was this good, but he struggled in New York. And then he struggled, I think he was with Carolina, and then was a backup to Purdy in San Francisco and learned from Purdy and Kyle Shanahan, then went to Minnesota last year. McCarthy got hurt. He won 14 games. They didn't want to re-sign him, so he signed a big deal with Seattle, won 14 games again. Resurrected his career and, might be the number 3 guy in the draft. He's playing with with it, led his team to a Super Bowl, and he's the favorite to win it. So maybe he is what everybody thought he was to start, but we'll never know. If he would have got to stay in New York, but get those new chances, and we'll see if he can win on Sunday.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the old saying that a lot of times teams and organizations fail players more than the other way around. So for him to go to the Jets, just about everybody fails at the Jets, give or take, and there's other franchises like that, obviously, that we know in the NFL. So he had to go through some growing pains, but yeah, you mentioned it. He's showing all the talent now this year, and then the past 2 playoff games of this postseason of why he was the number 3 pick. I mean, he's big, he can move, he's got a strong arm, so all the physical attributes are always there. That him seeing ghosts way back in the day and then the struggles he had really ruined his reputation. But these past 2 years, he's done a lot to change that. And I think everyone, including myself, one of the keys, of course, in any game is turnovers. And first of all, will we have any? And then my next question would be, as I'm watching the game on Sunday, if he has a turnover, will it be a snowball effect into a 3 or 4 turnover game?
Yeah, correct. I mean, turnovers happen. Sometimes they're his fault. Sometimes they're not. A tip ball or something like that. But you're correct. His history has shown that maybe he struggles with that a little bit. Now, the last couple of years, much better at that and limit the turnovers. But I would say on both sides, and then Derek May's the same way. He's just a young guy that doesn't have the experience. Will he let a mistake really affect the rest of his game, or will it continue his great play and not let one mistake snowball into others? And that goes with the team as well. And I do want to get into Vrabel being a coach. Obviously he has Super Bowl rings as a player with the Patriots and going back, but this is his first time in the Super Bowl as a coach. I believe he did get to the NFC Championship game with the Titans, correct, though?
That's correct.
Yeah, so, I mean, he was close, just didn't quite get there. And you got to think, I understand that sometimes it's time for a change, but if you're the Titans, you just got to be looking back. They're on, like, their 3rd new coach since he left, and it's like, what is going on?
Yeah, the Titans definitely most likely made a mistake there. If they could go back and fix it, obviously they've got some weird ownership things going on. I do think the Titans did a good job in their coaching hires this cycle. We'll see how it works out for those guys. But yeah, for this game, the Patriots are definitely going to have the coaching advantage just because Vrabel and Josh McDaniels either played or have coached in so many of these big games. So they know what the week's like. They know how to handle the media. They know what things Bill Belichick did, what Josh McDaniels had to do when he was under Bill, and all these different types of things. So they have the coaching advantage. I do believe Seattle has the roster advantage.
Yeah, I mean, what is the spread as of today? Do you know?
Spread's still at 4.5.
Okay, so
for the Seahawks.
So it's more than a field goal. So they do definitely think Seattle is better. Usually if it's under a field goal, there's just a little bit of a lean one way or the other. But more than a field goal, they definitely think Seattle is the better team. And I agree with that. Like you said, the roster-wise. And then Darnold does have more experience. And May has not played great in these playoffs, and potential injuries / just he's a young guy. Now, people do forget or maybe don't know that he comes from a family of great athletes. Like his brother was one of the best basketball players, played basketball at North Carolina. His family is athletic as all get out. So he does have a background, and obviously these guys are always great, but he has been there, done that, seen that with family members as well.
Yeah, when you talk about his struggles, it's probably been a little bit of a combination of stuff for these playoffs. I do think he's really made some mistakes. He's had a little bit of fumbling issues, but also his offensive line hasn't been the best in these playoffs. Now, they played some tough defenses, and I think that could be, as long as Sam Darnold doesn't turn the ball over. If we talk about the Seahawks defense, and a lot of people are saying these are two teams that aren't really great, because, again, these are teams that we didn't expect to be here. But if you look at the history of DVOA, a DVOA is a stat to measure defenses, against expected average. Seattle's defense is the 13th best rated since 1978. So if the Patriots offensive line struggles, I think this thing could get ugly.
Yeah, and they played Houston, Denver, and now Seattle's defenses. Are those the three best defenses in the league?
Well, the Chargers too. So I forget what stat it was, if it was points or total defense or what. But if they do win the Super Bowl, I think they'd be the first team to beat 4 out of 5 top defenses in whatever statistical category in a playoff run, a single playoff run. So, yeah, I mean, the Patriots are no slouch, but I do worry about the Patriots' offensive line in this one. I think that is going to be the Achilles heel for them, and that's the difference in the game for me.
Yeah, and let's go ahead. We can kind of make our picks. I'll start here. I am going to pick Seattle to win this game. Now, I am not always going to make that pick in some of our other games that we are, because there is some strategy / gameplay involved. But just straight up, who I think is going to win the football game, I am going to pick Seattle, and I do think it is by 10 points or more, but I do think if Darnold makes that mistake, it could go the other way, but in a dogfight all the way to the end.
Yeah, I've got Seahawks 27, Patriots 16, so I got an 11-point win for Seattle. And one thing about Mike Macdonald, he's played 10 quarterbacks that are age 25 or younger, and those quarterbacks are 1-9 versus him. So with Drake maybe in 25, that's another statistical category that leans in the favor of the Seahawks if you're looking for one for a deciding factor. But obviously, if Sam Darnold plays a clean game, I think Seattle gets this one taken care of. But with the way that the Patriots' offensive line and Drake may have looked this postseason, I think this is going to be about a 10-point victory, give or take.
Yeah, and then, just kind of in general, we talked about already, but how much is this going to be? I mean, it's going to be a huge watched game, and this is, touching the political thing, but how much of the halftime show is going to have an effect on the watching of the game, do you think? Because I'm interested to watch it. I'm not a Bad Bunny fan. I don't know much about him, but I watch every year. All of them are a little bit different. A few years ago when it was Eminem and Dr. Dre, but that's right in my wheelhouse. Those were the musicians when I was 16 years old that were all over the place. Now Bad Bunny just won a whole bunch of Grammys or whatever the other night. Again, didn't watch the show, don't really know all the stuff, but he's popular. People like him. It is what it is. Are people going to not watch the game because the NFL is having him at halftime? Yeah, or do you think that'll affect it at all?
There will be some, and then of course, there will be some that just quit watching at halftime. So I don't know how that affects ratings. Does that, how long does someone have to turn the game off for it to affect the rating? I obviously have no idea on that, but the most watched Super Bowl was obviously last year. I think the average or the peak was 127 million. I'm sure the NFL wants to get over 130 or keep increasing those numbers. But there also could be people that are going to watch the Super Bowl because of him too. So maybe maybe those people that agree or disagree, it'll offset a little bit. It's tough nowadays because Super Bowl Sundays become such a big event. Even if you don't want to watch it, a lot of people go to watch parties. Even if they're not watching the game, they're on all the TVs. I know I got to fly to Charlotte for a sales meeting on Sunday, and I land about 3, and then me and a bunch of coworkers are meeting at 5:30, about an hour before the game on the East Coast, to watch the game. So yeah, it'll probably have some effect, but again, it's tough for people not to tune in. It's such a big national event.
Yeah, and then, one other thing I touched on it. The Olympics do start this weekend as well. So there will be some people back and forth. It's on the same channel, essentially. They're both on NBC. So I'm assuming the Olympics will be on USA and the other channels under the umbrella of NBC. And, with the extent, it's become an all-day event. The game starts about 5 o'clock or so here in Iowa. And, at noon, you're going to already have some of the Super Bowl stuff on, but it probably will be on. But I'll have another TV where I have the skiing or whatever else is on for the Olympics, or usually there's a good basketball game or something before the game as well. So there are other things on, and and I don't know how that works either, where you turn it off or turn it on. And one thing, kind of a thing last year was to see a three-peat. We've never had a three-peat. That was an opportunity to happen last year. So I think there were some random people watching that game, seeing if that would happen, because that would have been history last year.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The three-peat, the whole Taylor Swift effect. She had her own crowd that she was bringing into the game. So maybe this singer will do the same. I don't know if to the same extent, of course, but there's that factor, like you said, some political stuff going on. But yeah, with NBC having all this, it's a pretty good, going to be a pretty good, early start to their year with all this stuff going on.
Yeah, their rating share is going to be quite high on Sunday, I believe, because, and the Olympics are what they are, but do I watch the downhill skiing any other time but the Olympics, or do I watch figure skating any time but the Olympics, or hockey? Well, maybe a little bit of NHL hockey, but not much. Do I ever watch curling? No. But will I this over the next few weeks? Yep. And that's most people, I think, in the U.S. And we support the U.S. and want them to win, and just as a sport fan, a fan of sport, you love seeing people be at their best and perform at the highest level and succeed and see their dreams come true. And that's it's great to watch. And I don't care what country you're from, to see people doing their best and living out a dream, and they work so hard. And, whether it's compete for the first and only time, or if it is to win that gold medal, the goal for each person might be a little bit different, but that's why the Olympics and sport in general is so good, because it brings so many people together under the same cause.
Yeah, you've got all the different people from different countries rooting their entire country on, or rooting their individual athletes from their country. And yeah, you're right. A lot of these sports I don't watch at all during the year, except the Olympics, of course, just like a lot of people. And it certainly helps folks like us who are big football fans, that once the football season is over, after Sunday, there's something else to watch other than just really basketball. And, there are some other things coming up here in the coming days that I did have a little countdown written down, but maybe we'll save it for next week, of some things to look forward to after this final football game that we've got on Sunday. But yeah, Olympics are fun. Winter, summer, some of the sports I understand a little bit. Some I have no idea how they're scoring it necessarily, but you kind of get a feeling from the crowd's reaction and the announcers who's doing good, who isn't. Obviously, track and field, it's pretty easy. Whoever crosses the finish line first type of deal. Or when you got basketball or hockey, it's whoever scores the most points. But there's the other ones that, like I said, you only watch during the Olympics, and it's kind of fun not to know all the rules too.
Right. And I look at like a sport like luge or skeleton and the bobsled, where you do like 4 runs, and it's a total time of like 5 minutes, and they're all within half a second. It's like, holy smokes, all the variables involved, and they're all that close, from first to second, or second to third, or first to third. It's a second or two, and it's craziness.
Yeah, the best of the best in the world. So it is crazy how close some of those times are, and the margin for error from a gold medal to not even placing.
All right. Anything else with the Super Bowl? Or I think we did a pretty good job of that. Anything else you want to hit with the Super Bowl?
No, I think weather should be fine as far as that goes. San Francisco can actually get a little bit rainy, year round in certain times, and a little bit cooler. But I think it should be around 55-ish and cloudy during kickoff, because it'll be 3 or 3:30 out in near San Francisco.
Okay. Who do you think will be MVP? That would be the one. I know you're big on that stuff.
Well, with my prediction, I'm going to go with Sam Darnold.
Yep. Okay. Yep. I didn't know if you had Smith and Nigba, or however you say his name. I mean, obviously he could if he had 3 touchdowns or something like, but usually the quarterback would also have 3, and probably more than that if he has that many touchdowns. So
yeah, I'll definitely have some play on some defensive players in case they have a defensive touchdown, or maybe Raheed Shaheed if he has a special teams touchdown and a receiving touchdown, maybe he could be a long shot MVP type guy. But, if I had to make my official prediction, I'd go with Sam Darnold.
Yeah, I would be the same way there. All right, now let's go to what used to be a huge day, and probably there's many people listening right now or that will listen in the coming days. Today is National Signing Day for college football. This used to be a huge deal. I mean, there were parties, there were Iowa State staff would go down to bars in Des Moines and Ankeny and celebrate. You always had big press conferences. You sat around. I mean, I remember when I was there, you sat around and watched the fax machine for all your guys to come in. I mean, it was craziness. And there actually are still a lot of people. Now, I don't know if it's the fax and stuff, but people that signed. I got, I follow Iowa State football, and they had several people signed today. And they actually flipped a 4-star recruit that was going to go to Washington State. I mean, now, that's not a huge surprise to come to Iowa State. But on the flip side of it, we also lost one of our better recruits, and I believe he signed with Oklahoma State. And that was always the case. That's nothing new. But when I heard that this morning and I started seeing that on X and Facebook and I think Instagram, all of them, I follow Iowa State accounts, I'm like, huh. And it is. It's always the first Wednesday in February. And it's just how much that early signing period has changed it. And the transfer portal is so much more important. High school players they're not counted on. And unfortunately, you look at a class, let's just say between December and now, they signed 20 guys. 15 of them aren't going to finish their career at Iowa State. And that's just the reality of today. And it might even be higher than that.
I didn't even know today was National Signing Day until I got on social media and I saw Eli Campman signed with Iowa, the son of former Iowa great Aaron Campman. And I was like, oh, okay, it's National Signing Day. Because,
that makes us feel old, too.
Yeah, every time I got on Instagram or Facebook, feels like, a couple times a week here and there, I see someone's committed to this school or that school or to Iowa. So it's tough for me to really even keep track of it. But, yeah, back in the day, I remember 2004, Derek Williams was the number one recruit in the nation, and he signed with Penn State. And it was a big deal. ESPN ran a bunch of promos about it, commercials. And I remember watching his announcement with my buddies in my grandma's basement. That's how big of a deal it was. Mm-hmm. And now it's like, like I said, I don't even keep track of any of it because as you mentioned, you bring in all these players and, half of them are going to transfer or not finish with their careers at some of these schools. So it really doesn't matter until you get closer to the start of football season. Then you start really looking at the depth chart, who stayed, and, then all the rumors come out of who's unhappy and when are they going to leave. And it's a lot to keep track of anymore.
Yeah, I was listening to a Cyclone podcast and they talked about Paul Rhodes when Alan Lazard, he showed it, in his press conference showed that he sent his letter of intent because Bobby Elliott, who was at Iowa State, had went to Notre Dame and they tried to recruit him. And then Iowa was obviously trying to get him to flip. And that's when Iowa State wasn't very good. And Lazard was the best player in Iowa. He was a legacy player at Iowa State. His dad played there, but it was, he had committed there, but until you sign, it was always a little bit of free game. And he was just, how Paul Rhodes was, just so proud and man of integrity, kept his commitment for 14 months. They played it this morning on the show. It was just how different it is. I don't know if they're even doing anything today to celebrate these guys signing. One, we don't know who any of them are. None of them are from Iowa. And two, we don't even know the coaching staff that signed these guys. I mean, and that's no one's fault. We talked about last week how Jimmy Rogers started to make the rounds, and he is. But overall, we still don't know the coach. I mean, I couldn't tell you who the running back coach is. I've heard the name and I've seen it, but I don't know it off the top of my head, like I did with the Iowa State coaches that had been here for 6-7 years but previously. So it's just such a different ball game, and like I said, just the reality is these guys aren't going to be here in 4 years anyway. So it's there's no point in getting attached to him.
Yeah, for me, outside of quarterback or really high recruit, it really doesn't mean that much to me until I really see him on the field or getting some playing time. I mean, until then, it's just kind of like whatever. It's just the change of college football. So I see a few names here and there. I said Eli Campman was one that kind of caught my eye, but other than that, it's just, okay, here come these guys. I'll see how long they are here, and I'll dig into them more and root for more once they start playing, if they ever do.
Yeah. All right, that's probably enough on that. I just wanted to touch on that because it happened to be today. That was really the only thing. But let's move on to basketball now. Let's start NBA trade deadlines right around there. Lots of trades happening. Lots of teams trying to just move on from past bad decisions. But I don't follow the NBA enough, and I know you don't either, to really get into that. But George Niang got traded again to Memphis. Now he's hurt this year, hasn't played at all this year. So it's not like we can drive, instead of being in Utah, now we can't drive down to Memphis and watch him play in a much closer arena and environment. He's hurt this year. So, but he's one of those guys. He's been in the league a long time, but he's going to have in his basement 7 or 8 uniforms, throughout his career to hang up. And that's kind of, it sucks, but it's neat at the same time. But main thing, let's go college basketball. We flipped the calendar to February. We're in the first week of February. Iowa State is still, a week and a half away from really the teeth of their schedule. Once Valentine's Day hits, it's on from then on out. They play almost every game from then on out as a quad one opportunity. It's the who's who of the Big 12, and this year the who's who of college basketball. Arizona's number 1. Houston's in the top 10. Baylor is about top 15. Texas Tech's a top 15 team. It's just that's who you're playing from there on out because they haven't played them yet. The Big 12 definitely backloaded it. Arizona's in the same spot. They're the number 1 team in the country, undefeated, but they play about the same schedule Iowa State is coming up. They just haven't played that many teams yet that are any good. They played at BYU, good win, but they got to go. They got to play Houston. They got to play Texas Tech. They got to play Kansas. It's just that is the Big 12 coming up. They backloaded it for a reason and to get the eyeballs on it in the second half of February. And now is the time where you start going and checking Joe Lunardi. What seed are you? That's number 1. And then also location. And now if you're Iowa, I think as of today, you're safely in the tournament. And yes, you would love to play in a relatively close spot. St. Louis, Oklahoma City are the 2 close sites to here for the first couple rounds. So yes, you would love to play that. But overall, you're looking at the seeding way more important than the spot. If you can jump up to that 6 or 7 seed, but play in San Diego, I don't even know if that's a site. You would much rather do that than be an 8 seed and play in St. Louis. Because you have the way better chance of getting to the Sweet 16 out of San Diego. Now, you're Iowa State. A little bit of that. Would you rather be a number 1 seed and have to play in San Diego? Yes, but if you're the 1 seed, you get that advantage. You're going to be playing in St. Louis. Now, you're also fighting a 1 seed with Illinois, who obviously is even closer to St. Louis than you are, and Michigan, Houston. Then you got Oklahoma State there, or Oklahoma City there. Also, Houston would be in that conversation. But Iowa State is in a position where you're fighting. I think a 1 seed would be very, very difficult. Now, if you end the season, if you would win the Big 12 with only 2 losses, and then you would win the Big 12 tournament, if you run the table, you might be the number 1 overall seed in the country. I don't think that's going to happen. They're going to lose some games. In fact, if they lose 2 or less, I'd be ecstatic, and it really doesn't even matter who they are to. But you want a 2 seed, you want a 3 seed, but you are also worried about where you're at. You want to be in the Midwest region. You probably don't care a whole lot whether it's St. Louis or Oklahoma City. St. Louis is closer, but Oklahoma City is not that far either. So fans will go, but you want that Midwest bracket. So then you can go play in Chicago And if you're the 2 seed playing in Chicago, and then you might happen to have to play Michigan as the 1 seed, like if it ended today, that's probably what would happen. You're okay with that. Because if you're the 1 seed in Chicago, you're going to play Michigan as the 2. So it really doesn't matter. And that's the game you're going to have to win to get to the Final Four anyway. So if you're Iowa State, you're a much more, where are you at for that Sweet 16 game? You got to get there, but you want to be in Chicago.
Definitely being closer to home, obviously for Iowa or Iowa State, as you mentioned, is going to be a big help compared to some of the other sites. I really haven't watched a lot of men's basketball yet. I will start after Sunday. I was talking to Cody about that a couple of nights ago, and I was just kind of looking, obviously on the KenPom rankings, and he's got Iowa State 4th overall. And with offensive rating and defensive rating, we've talked about that in the past. When it comes to tournament time, you really want to be in about the top 25 for both of those. Iowa State's ranked 6 in offense and 6 in defense. Now, a few teams ahead of them and a few teams behind them are ranked really well, as you would expect. But to be 6 and 6 in those rankings, I always go to that because, again, I don't watch a ton of these first half of the season of men's college basketball. So that's kind of where my starting point is. And then, of course, looking at the betting odds, you can get Iowa State right now, 15 to 19 to 1, along with some other pretty good schools, Kansas, Florida, Illinois, Purdue. I mean, there's some good schools. You can get Nebraska anywhere from 25 to 30 to 1. So there's some good teams that you can get that are kind of bunched together if you're looking to do some action right now.
Yeah, Kansas is a team right now. If Peterson is healthy and he can play 35 minutes like he did the other night against Texas Tech, they are a problem, and they could go a long, long ways. And another show I was listening to, I can't remember who this one was. I think it was a different one, or maybe it was, I think this one was a different one because this was an interview with another guy that has nothing to do with Iowa. This was like a national writer. Kansas has a dude that can go win the game for you. Arizona has a dude that can go win the game for you. Houston has a dude that can go win the game for you. Does this is maybe the one thing I would say, does Iowa State have the dude that you just give the ball to that can go win a game for you? I don't know if they do. Now, their 3 guys are as good as 3 guys in the country, but I don't, you can't just give the ball to Milan and say, go. He needs to get set up for his 3. Jefferson, sometimes he gets a little bit out of control when he's trying to be the point forward, if that's what you just ask him to do over and over and over to do. It gets a little bit much for him and a little bit turnover tendency. Taman, you want the ball in his hand, but they might, let him shoot it a little bit more, and his percentage of shooting isn't the best. It's really good, and he can do it, but I don't know if there's just one guy you give the ball to and say, hey, go win us the basketball game. Iowa State is a team in that sense more than others.
Yeah, for sure. Peterson that you spoke about with Kansas, obviously he's been going nuts. Everybody in sports media has been talking about him. Like I said, Cody texted me about him. I'm thinking that's one team I'm thinking about throwing a little bet on. About a month ago, I threw some a few long shots on some teams again that had good KenPom rankings. I don't think any of them are probably going to win, but it gives me some rooting interest in the tournament. Yeah, for Iowa State, as you mentioned, sometimes you just need that guy that can go get you 20, 25 points in the game. That's the one thing that Iowa does have with Bennett Sturts.
Yep.
But they do have a lot of the team that was in the tournament last year, so they have a little bit of experience. But obviously Iowa State is the better team. Looking at them at 15 to 19 to 1, it's pretty interesting. But as you've mentioned, who's your go get a bucket guy in a crucial game? And you would hope in the first 2 rounds maybe you don't need that.
Yep.
But once you get kind of that Sweet 16 and on, some of these games are going to come down the wire, and it's usually one player that kind of takes over for either team.
Yeah, now that's not saying that Milan can go off for 35. I mean, that's not unheard of. I think actually in the Cincinnati game they lost, I think he had over 30. Just no one else was doing anything. And, you give the ball to Jefferson, he gets into the lane. If he isn't turning the ball over and can't get to the rim, kicks it out to Milan, and he's going to have a wide open 3. He shouldn't, because I don't think right now you could go off of him at all, but that's what makes Iowa State tougher than other teams because they don't have that guy. So, okay, so you do jump Jefferson every time he gets it. And now you got two guys, and now someone's rotating over, and you're a step slow on Milan, and he drains a three. That's what makes Iowa State tough, is they don't have the one guy that is going to go get 30 with the ball in his hand the whole time.
So what's your prediction right now? If you had to say, if the tournament started, how far would you say they would get?
Well, obviously matchups matter. I think they are one of the last 2 seeds or one of the first 3 seeds, if I had to make a guess. So I do think this team is, obviously health. Yeah, if it started today, as far as I know, everybody's healthy. I think they get to the Sweet 16 with being favored in that game to get to the Elite 8, and I do think they get to the Elite 8. And then it really depends on that matchup. They have the team to win that game. They really do. They have to play really well. Their ceiling is definitely Final Four. I think their base at today, as it stands, their base would be Sweet 16. Yeah, that's my if they don't make even with one injury, I think this team's good enough. They should make the Sweet 16. That definitely should be the baseline.
Yeah, I was going to say it feels like Sweet 16 would be the bare minimum. Hopefully, if injuries are okay, and that you hope that this can kind of be the year to maybe get a little bit further.
Yeah, if everybody is healthy and they get the Sweet 16 and lose, it's going to be a disappointment. Obviously, if injuries happen, then that changes it. But the way it's designed right now, if the tournament started today and they did not make the Elite 8, it would be a disappointment.
And if you had to pick today who the national champion would be as of right now, who would you pick? Because I like I said, I haven't watched much, so I'm just kind of looking at the rankings here, and some of these teams I've known have been good this year. But who would be your pick right now to win it all?
I don't watch a lot of other teams, just with my umpiring, watching Tyler, watching Connor, weekends, basketball. I don't sit around at night and watch college basketball. But everything I read, what I have watched, I do think Arizona is a real deal. Now, and then the other one that I think is sneaky good that, had been really good, and then last year it fell apart. But I think UConn is really, really good. Now, Arizona went in there and beat UConn, which is why I think Arizona will. But I think UConn's going to have something to say about it. One reason is the Big East is not as good as it's been, so they're going to stack up a bunch of wins. I think their 1 seed is almost a lock unless something haywire happens to them, just because of, Arizona is undefeated, number 1 in the country, and well-deserved. But they're going to lose a game or two, just like Iowa State's going to lose a game or two coming up just because of who they play. And when you play 4 or 5 top 15 teams in a row, you're probably going to lose one. That's just what happens in college basketball. It's been since 1976 that a team has been undefeated through the whole thing. Now, Kentucky went to the national semis it's probably been 10 years ago now. Time flies, but undefeated teams just don't happen anymore in basketball. So, but I would say Arizona or UConn are my 2 picks as of today.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, after Sunday, I'll definitely start watching more basketball. Of course, I'm going to watch the Iowa men tonight. Once we get off here, I know they've got Washington tonight, and then just looking ahead at their schedule, Sunday versus Northwestern, and then the following Wednesday at Maryland. So those are their next 3 games. I did look at some bracketology earlier. It looked like they're projected an 8 seed as of right now.
Yep.
And I don't know what record they need to officially get to ensure that they get in the tournament. I know I was just looking, there's 39 days left till Selection Sunday. Okay. So there's still a lot of time, but 16-5 is not the greatest record, but it's definitely not the worst though either. Do you think as of right now, I know they're for sure locked to get in, but things could go haywire, right?
Yeah, just as long as things don't go haywire, I think they're in. That you beat the teams you're supposed to beat. If you play Northwestern again, you got to win. If you play Minnesota again, you got to beat them. They play Nebraska twice, which is going to be tough. I think you can get them once. I don't think they're a top 5 team like they were coming into this week. They lost a couple games to 2 really good teams, and they led Michigan for like 38 minutes. And then they. Illinois kind of put it to them, but they had already beat Illinois earlier in the year, so they split. So that would be a really good win if you could get Nebraska once. That'd be a huge quad 1 win. I just don't know their schedule offhand, but if you play Penn State or you play Maryland or you play Rutgers again, you got to win those games. I would say as long as you don't lose games you're not supposed to, they're fine. If you're Iowa, you want to stay away from that 8-9 game if at all possible,
right?
Because you want to. It's actually okay to drop to a 10 or an 11, or jump up to 6 or 7, because you get to that first, you beat that first one. Now you're playing a 2 or a 3 seed, not the 1 seed. You don't want to play that 1 seed that second round. That's really tough, and it's. Not that it never happens, but it's pretty uncommon that the 8-9 seed beats the 1 in the second round. 1 seeds, by and large, I don't know the percentage. I would say it's probably 90% or higher get to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I just looked quick on Google. I'd have to double check this, but it looks like 8 seeds are 16 and 61 versus number 1 seeds. Now, I don't know how far back that goes. I'd have to double check that. But obviously, your point remains, though, that sometimes being that 6 or 7, 10 or 11 might be a little bit better avenue to getting further in the tournament.
Yeah, just you're playing not as good a team. The one seeds are really, really good. Now, I think some of this year, there's a real argument to be made that maybe from number 1 to number 8, there's not a big spread. Because you put Iowa State, I think, is ranked number 8 this week. You put them against Arizona on a neutral site, spread's not going to be very much. I would say less than 5 points Arizona. You could look that up on KenPom or whatever to see roughly what the spread would be. But, at Arizona, obviously Arizona is going to be favored a little bit. In Hilton Coliseum, it's going to be about a pick 'em. I would think. I wouldn't think it'd be more than 2.5 points Arizona. I really don't in Hilton. So there's your 1 and 8. That's your bottom 2 seed versus your top seed overall if the tournament started today, if you go by the rankings. And then, Illinois is really good. That's a team that's kind of sneaky good. I think Houston is sneaky good. And then UConn is UConn. Hurley knows what he's doing. Been there, done that, so they're going to be tough out. Iowa doesn't want any part of several of those teams. And Iowa State doesn't want any part of them until you have to in the Elite 8 or, then you have to. You're going to play a really good team. But you don't want to drop, if you're Iowa State, you don't want to drop to a 4 and have to go play Michigan in Chicago in the Sweet 16 or go play UConn. You don't want that. That's going to be a really tough ask.
For sure. Someone I was listening to just a couple days ago, they were saying this year it feels like there's legitimately 10 to probably 14 teams that can realistically win the national title this year. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't feel like that a lot of years. It feels like it's more 4 to 5 teams. This year he was saying like 10 to 14 realistically. That you like I said, if there's some 20 to 25 to ones that you like right now, maybe there's a little bit of value in it. It could be kind of a wide open March Madness this spring, which always makes for a good tournament.
Well, you think about it this way. When Iowa State lost to Kansas 2 weeks ago, Kansas was not ranked. That's insane. And I'm not putting – they would be one of those 10 to 14 teams that could win the whole thing. And they weren't even ranked 2 weeks ago. Now, they got a player back that's going to be most likely the number 1 or number 2 pick in the draft. That helps a lot. But that's how fragile or simple this is. If the kid from BYU gets hurt and can't play, well, then that drops them out. That Illinois, that Wagler freshman, he's a stud too. I mean, that's a team. I watched the Illinois-Nebraska game, and Illinois impressed me a lot. And that was a team 2 years ago that Iowa State had a really good team. I thought that was a really nice team. Injuries weren't a problem. They won 2 games in Omaha really easy. Iowa State's the 3, Illinois is the 6. I think it was like a 6-point favorite going into that game, and Illinois put it on them. Pretty good. And Illinois was better that night. And Underwood knows how to coach. And it's just, I don't want to see Illinois anytime soon.
Yeah, it looks like they're the number 1 offense. And speaking of that 3-6 game that you were talking about, was that the year that Zach and Tiffany went to Lexington or Louisville, or was that a couple years before that? Because I think they went to go watch. I think it was Louisville. They went to go watch Iowa State play, and I think Iowa State might have lost, if I remember right.
Well, that would have been a long time ago. Time flies, Trev.
Okay, was that more like 5 or 6 years ago, or longer than that?
I'm going to say it's like 10 years ago. That's when they lost to UAB, got upset 3-14.
Was that the same one? I mean, maybe it was. I don't know.
Did they go again? So they were up with us in Milwaukee last year. They didn't stay for the second game. They were there for the first game. Tiff was there for work, and then Zach just came up, and then I was already there, and Lauren, we were up there going to the game, and then we met each other and hung out for a couple of days or whatever. But I think one time they went, it was Lexington or Louisville or something. I think they were maybe on their way to Nashville, and I'm pretty sure that that was a UAB game. So that'd have been 2014, somewhere right in there. And they got beat. They got upset. It was the first game of the whole tournament. They were out at 1:00 on Thursday.
Yeah, maybe it was that long ago. It is tough to keep track of the time, like you said. One quick thing on, we kind of covered Iowa men. On the Iowa women, they lost 2 games out west. They had a 2-game trip out there. Young team. Addie Dill struggled starting, but it sounds like she's still going to start, which I think that's the right decision.
That's the right play. Yeah.
Give her some more time. They play Thursday versus Minnesota, next Wednesday versus Washington, and then later in the month on the 16th at Nebraska. So they've kind of got some time spread before their next few games. But last I saw, they were projected number 3 seed, and as we know at the women's tournament time, you want to be one of those top 4 seeds. That way you get to play your first 2 games at home. So as long as they can keep taking care of business and stay around 10, 11, 12 in the rankings, they should be able to have some home March Madness games.
Yeah, I mean, they should, you feel bad for Addie Deal a little bit with going back home, right? She's from California, right?
Yes.
And so you wanted her to play better, but it's a lot of pressure. It's your first time starting against 2 good teams. I mean, USC doesn't have Juju Watkins, but they're a national power historically. And then with her, then UCLA is one of the best teams in the country. I mean, that's just flat out. I do think there's it's UConn, and then everybody else is just a little step down, but they're in that first step down. Them and South Carolina and LSU are that just next step below. So you'd like to see maybe the games be a little bit closer and then maybe pull out that USC game. But overall, I mean, when you're win-loss in before the season, you're not super unhappy with those 2 losses, as long as you don't lose another one that you're not you need to beat Minnesota this week.
Yeah, absolutely they do. And, as you mentioned, UConn and UCLA, that would be my national championship pick as of right now today for the women's side. Yep. UConn's a massive heavy favorite, but if you think UCLA can get it done, I think they're 7 or 8 to 1 in the odds. And once March Madness gets here, I'll have a few parlays for people. I did pretty good on those last year on the women's side. So that's something I like to do that makes the tournament a little bit more fun to watch. I did see one of Iowa's projected teams that they would play if they moved on would be LSU. So it'd be another Iowa versus Kim Mulkey matchup. There just wouldn't be Caitlin Clark or Angel Reese, though.
No, and this year I think they're really good again. It'd be a hard game for Iowa State or Iowa. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it definitely would, but it'd be funny if they were to meet again in the tournament.
Did you happen to look? Is Iowa State back in the tournament or still in the tournament, hanging on?
Yeah, I think they were. Pretty sure they were. Bracketology. NCAA women. I think I saw them as an 8 seed, but let me just double check real quick.
Yeah.
It's
Much
low.
like we just talked about with Iowa, you want to get off that line very, very much so, because you don't want to play UConn in that next game for sure.
Yeah, that would definitely be a tough one for Iowa State. They have them as a 9 seed right now.
Okay.
They'd have to go play UCLA, but as long as Iowa State can get healthy, I do think that's a team that can make a little bit of a run in the tournament, given if, Audie Crooks can go for 25 to 30, a player like that can dominate.
Well, yeah, she's done that in the tournament. I think she had like 40 points against Stanford 2 years ago, her freshman year, and that's kind of when she broke out herself. So Iowa State with their health, they're healthier. Addie Brown still very questionable whether she returns or not, but their goal would be obviously try to get off that 8-9 line. But at the beginning of the year, it was get a home game, get those first two. Now that if that happens, it's bonus gravy. But they just want to be in the tournament and with a chance to, win a game, and then, have that chance to get the Sweet 16. And hopefully Addie Brown can come back by the middle of September or March there and give a boost and then kind of be sneaky good because, when she played and was playing well, they were undefeated and they beat Iowa. Iowa's a top 10 basketball team and Iowa State beat them straight up, so healthy Iowa State's probably a top 10 team as well. And, that would get you a Sweet 16 trip if you're one of the top 10 teams in the country, obviously. So hopefully she can come back and be a great contributor to the team, but very questionable at this time.
Yeah, for sure. If they get healthy, that's the team I'll be looking at in bracket challenges and, like I said, parlays, because not a ton of people still are paying attention to the women's game as much as the men's, though we have seen it grown. So Iowa State's one of those teams, of course, you and I know if they're at full strength, they will be better than what their seed is most likely.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I do think if she comes back and shows she's healthy, I do think the committee will take that into play. Where with her they were undefeated. I think she might have played against Baylor, but she did not play well or very much, and you could tell she was hurt. And then she sat out the rest of those. She only played 10 minutes against Baylor. I think I could be wrong there, but she did not. She was not healthy against Baylor. They lost, and then obviously they went on another 4-game losing streak. But she can come back the last week of the regular season and in the Big 12 tournament, and they can get to the Big 12 tournament title game or something like that. Maybe resume-wise, they're a 7 seed. Well, maybe they give them a 6 because, they've got their girl back. They were this before she was hurt. Maybe you can get a seed line there. I don't know.
No, that's definitely a possibility. And, yeah, like I said, we're only just a little over a month away from the Selection Sunday, so it's coming up quick on us.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Anything else? We're just shy of an hour here, just right before 10 o'clock, and let everybody go watch the Hawks. The Hawks need to win tonight. This is one of those. If they lose, it's not. This isn't one of those. You have to win this game. This is one. If you want to get off that 8-9 line, this is a game you need to win. They've been out on the West Coast for a few days. It's on the road in conference play. Washington, they're not the best team in the Big Ten, but they're definitely not. They're not Oregon. They're a lot better than Oregon, and you got to play well.
Yeah, hopefully they do, and I'll be tuning in once we get off here. Be one of the first games of the Iowa men I've watched in some time. So I hope they play well, and obviously, Iowa going to the West Coast in football. Hopefully, it's a little bit better in basketball terms, given the history.
Yeah, and say the history has not done well for Kirk Ferentz and before Kirk Ferentz. Rose Bowls, Holiday Bowls, all those have always been a struggle out west. For the most part, there have been exceptions. One of the recent Holiday Bowls, they killed USC, but back in the Holiday Bowls, with Matt Rogers and who was a quarterback, the two brothers, Hartley was a quarterback, I think they tied out there or lost out at the Holiday Bowl as well. So California's not treated them well. Arizona's not treated them well, but we'll see. Hopefully they do well, win another game, and yeah, you get them off that 8-9 game, so give them a chance. And I'm not a Hawk fan, but it would be kind of interesting to see the reaction and what Fran McCaffrey's family, how they would react if somehow they would get to the Sweet 16 in the first year post McCaffrey.
Yeah, that would definitely be a big headline since he couldn't get that done.
He's never done it in his history,
right,
as a coach.
No,
not just in Iowa.
No, that would be interesting to see what his reaction would be if somebody asked him in an interview or something like that. But
his kid's reation would be more interesting than his.
Right. No, that would be something. But hopefully everybody enjoys the game tonight. I think Iowa's a slight favorite, and fingers crossed they can get the win and play well tonight.
Yeah. So, all right. Thanks, Trev. Enjoy the Super Bowl. Last football game until there's going to be football. There's the USFL or whatever it's called now. XFL. I don't know what it is, but there is that coming up. If you love football that much, we will be talking draft time and free agent and combine. The NFL never stops, but this will be the last football game that really matters until I think college football is back a week next year. Like Iowa State's first game is September 5th, which is almost 2 full weeks after last year's first game. Well, obviously that was a week early, but just the way the calendar falls, that first game is always right around Labor Day, but Labor Day is like September 6th or whatever, or 7th, whatever. It's about as late as it can be. So everything's back a week, and obviously, Iowa will be looking to get to the playoff, and then Iowa State, complete unknown, and we'll see how it goes starting in September.
It'll be here before we know it, because this football season went really fast, and it feels like they all go faster and faster each year and each season.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Trev. It is 10 o'clock, right about when we said we wanted to be done, right at an hour on the show. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We appreciate it, and we'll talk again next week.
Have a good one.